There is a shipping route opening up at the top of the world, a route that, for most of human history, was completely impassable, locked under ice so thick that ships couldn't even dream of crossing it. A frozen barrier at the roof of the planet that separated the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans by thousands of miles of frozen ocean. But the ice is melting, and what is emerging from beneath it is something that could fundamentally reshape global trade, military power, and the balance of economic dominance between East and West. The Northern Sea Route, what China calls the Polar Silk Road, and what analysts are calling the Arctic Silk Road, runs along the northern coast of Russia from the Bering Strait in the east to the Norwegian Sea in the west. When fully navigable, it cuts the shipping distance between Shanghai and Rotterdam by nearly 40% compared to the current route through the Suez Canal, 40% shorter. Thousands of miles saved, weeks cut from journey times. For a global economy that moves 90% of its goods by sea, that is not a minor adjustment. That is a fundamental restructuring of how the world trades, and the race to control this route between Russia, China, the United States, and a dozen other nations has already begun. The Arctic Silk Road is not one single route. It is a concept, a collection of potential shipping lanes that run through the Arctic Ocean as the sea ice retreats. The most developed of these is the Northern Sea Route, the NSR, which runs along Russia's northern coastline through the Barents Sea, the Kara Sea, the Laptev Sea, the East Siberian Sea, and the Chukchi Sea before meeting the Pacific Ocean at the Bering Strait. Russia has administered this route since the Soviet era. Russian law requires all foreign ships using it to hire Russian icebreaker escorts and pay transit fees, a source of significant national revenue and strategic leverage. A second route, the Transpolar Sea Route, runs directly across the Arctic Ocean through the North Pole itself. It is currently only seasonally navigable and requires the most powerful icebreakers to transit. But as ice continues retreating, it is expected to become increasingly viable. A third option, the Northwest Passage, runs through the Canadian Arctic archipelago, connecting the Pacific to the Atlantic through Canadian territorial waters. Canada claims it as internal waters. The United States disputes this, calling it an international strait. Each route has different strategic implications. Each passes through different national territorial claims. And each is becoming more navigable every year as Arctic sea ice continues its historic decline. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the global average. That number, 4 times, is not a rounding error. It is the result of a phenomenon scientists call Arctic amplification. As sea ice melts, it exposes dark ocean water that absorbs more heat than the reflective white ice it replaced. More heat absorption accelerates further melting, a feedback loop that is currently running well ahead of most scientific projections. In 1980, Arctic summer sea ice covered approximately 7.5 million square kilometers. By 2023, that number had fallen to approximately 4.2 million square kilometers, a loss of more than 40% in 4 decades. The trend line is consistent and accelerating. Current projections from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change suggest that the Arctic Ocean will experience its first ice-free summer sometime between 2030 and 2050. Some more recent studies suggest it could happen before 2030. An ice-free Arctic summer means the Northern Sea Route is open for shipping for potentially 4 to 5 months per year without icebreaker assistance. The Transpolar Route becomes increasingly viable. What was once one of the most hostile and inaccessible environments on Earth is transforming into an open ocean, one that happens to sit at the geographic center of the Northern Hemisphere, equidistant from the world's largest economies. The melting ice is not just an environmental catastrophe. It is also, for certain powers, a geopolitical opportunity. To understand why the Arctic Silk Road matters, you need to understand how global trade currently moves. The world's 2 great oceanic trade arteries are the Suez Canal, connecting Europe and Asia through the Middle East, and the Panama Canal, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific through Central America. Together, these 2 choke points handle an enormous fraction of global maritime trade. They also represent extraordinary vulnerability. The Suez Canal can be, and has been, blocked. In 2021, the container ship Ever Given ran aground in the Suez Canal and blocked it for 6 days, causing an estimated $9.6 billion in daily trade disruption. Attacks by Houthi forces in the Red Sea in 2023 forced dozens of major shipping companies to reroute entirely, adding weeks and thousands of miles to their journeys. The Arctic route bypasses all of this. No Suez Canal, no Red Sea, no Strait of Hormuz, no piracy hotspots, no politically unstable choke points controlled by third parties. From Shanghai to Rotterdam via the Suez Canal is approximately 19,000 kilometers. Via the Northern Sea route, approximately 12,800 kilometers. A reduction of roughly 6,200 kilometers. At typical container ship speeds, that is approximately 10 to 15 days saved per journey. For a shipping industry that moves $14 trillion in goods per year, the economic implications of cutting 15 days from major routes are staggering. No country has invested more in the Arctic Silk Road, or has more to gain from it, than Russia. Russia's Arctic coastline stretches over 24,000 kilometers. The country controls the majority of the Northern Sea route, and Russia has been preparing for an ice-diminished Arctic for decades. Russia currently operates the world's largest fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers, with approximately 40 icebreakers total, including vessels powerful enough to break through ice over 2 meters thick. No other country has anything close to this capability. The United States, by comparison, operates 2 heavy icebreakers, and both are aging. Russia has been building and expanding Arctic ports, military bases, and search and rescue infrastructure along its northern coast since the 2010s. New ports at Sabeta, Tiksi, and Pevek have been developed to handle LNG tankers and Arctic shipping traffic. In 2022, Russia announced plans to increase NSR cargo traffic to 80 million tons per year by 2024, a massive increase from the roughly 34 million tons that transited in 2021. Russia's Arctic strategy is not purely military. The Northern Sea route represents an enormous potential revenue stream, from transit fees, from LNG export infrastructure, from servicing the ships that will use the route. It is an economic lifeline for a country facing Western sanctions and seeking alternative revenue sources. The Arctic is Russia's frontier, and Russia has been building for it for years while the rest of the world has been watching. China's interest in the Arctic Silk Road is more recent, but no less serious. In 2018, China officially declared itself a near-Arctic state, a designation that puzzled Arctic geographers since China's territory comes no closer to the Arctic than 1,500 kilometers. But the designation was a statement of intent, not geography. China released its first official Arctic policy paper in 2018, explicitly naming the Northern Sea route as a key component of what it called the Polar Silk Road, an Arctic extension of the Belt and Road Initiative. China's motivation is straightforward. The Northern Sea route would give Chinese exports a shorter, faster, and less politically vulnerable path to European markets, reducing reliance on the Suez Canal and the maritime routes that the United States Navy currently dominates. Chinese shipping companies have been running trial voyages on the Northern Sea route since 2013. Chinese state-owned enterprises have invested in Arctic LNG projects in Russia, providing capital for Russian Arctic development in exchange for access to the route and its energy resources. Perhaps most significantly, China has been building icebreakers. The Shuilong, Snow Dragon, is China's primary research icebreaker. The Shuilong 2, commissioned in 2019, is China's first domestically built polar icebreaker. More are under construction. China is not yet an Arctic power, but it is investing systematically to become one. For most of the post-Cold War period, the United States treated the Arctic as a secondary concern. That has changed rapidly. The 2022 National Security Strategy and subsequent Arctic Strategy documents explicitly identified the Arctic as a region of strategic competition, acknowledging for the first time that the United States had fallen behind Russia and China in Arctic capability. The icebreaker gap is perhaps the most glaring symbol of American unpreparedness. Russia has approximately 40 icebreakers, including nuclear-powered vessels. China has 2 and is building more. The United States has 2 aging heavy icebreakers, the Polar Star and the Healy, and has been attempting to fund new construction for years without decisive action. A single new heavy icebreaker costs approximately $1 billion to build and takes several years to construct. Congress has repeatedly debated the issue without adequate resolution. Beyond icebreakers, the United States has limited Arctic port infrastructure, aging Arctic military installations, and communications gaps. GPS and satellite communications degrade significantly in high Arctic latitudes. American allies, particularly Norway, Denmark via Greenland, Canada, and Iceland, have significant Arctic stakes. NATO's relationship with these Arctic nations is a major American strategic asset, but the alliance's Arctic capabilities remain under-resourced relative to Russian Arctic military buildup. The Arctic is becoming a contested space, and the United States is playing catch-up. The Arctic is not solely a Russian-American-Chinese competition. 8 nations have territory within the Arctic Circle, and their interests are as varied as their geographies. Norway has perhaps the most sophisticated Arctic governance framework of any nation. Its Svalbard archipelago, a unique territory where all signatories to the 1920 Svalbard Treaty have equal rights of access, sits at the entrance to the Barents Sea, directly adjacent to the Northern Sea Route's western terminus. Norway has been at the center of Arctic resource development and environmental protection for decades. Canada's position is complicated by its disputed Northwest Passage. Canada insists the passage through its Arctic archipelago constitutes internal waters subject to Canadian law. The United States and most of the international community argue it is an international strait subject to freedom of navigation. As the passage becomes more navigable, this legal dispute will become increasingly consequential. Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark, occupies perhaps the most strategically significant piece of real estate in the entire Arctic, sitting between the Atlantic and the Arctic Ocean. American interest in Greenland has been explicit, with multiple administrations floating the idea of purchasing the island, suggestions that Greenland and Denmark have firmly rejected. Finland, Sweden, and Iceland complete the Arctic 8. All 3 joined or deepened their NATO relationships in 2022 and 2023, a development that significantly changed the strategic balance in the Arctic. The Arctic is becoming a crowded arena. The Arctic Silk Road is about more than shipping lanes. Beneath the Arctic Ocean lies one of the largest untapped reserves of fossil fuels on Earth. The U.S. Geological Survey has estimated that the Arctic contains approximately 90 billion barrels of undiscovered oil, 47 trillion cubic meters of natural gas, and 44 billion barrels of natural gas liquids. Together, these represent approximately 22% of the world's undiscovered conventional oil and gas resources. Russia has already begun developing its Yamal LNG complex, a massive liquefied natural gas facility on the Yamal Peninsula that produces LNG shipped via ice-strengthened tankers along the Northern Sea Route to Asian markets year-round. Beyond hydrocarbons, the Arctic seabed contains significant deposits of rare earth elements, nickel, copper, cobalt, and other strategic minerals. As climate change opens previously inaccessible terrain, these resources become increasingly viable to extract. The geopolitical implications are significant. Nations that establish territorial claims, infrastructure, and legal jurisdiction over Arctic waters before clear international rules are established will be positioned to control access to these resources for decades. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea provides the legal framework, but several Arctic nations have competing extended continental shelf claims that overlap in the central Arctic Ocean. The race to claim the bottom of the world is running parallel to the race to navigate its surface. The Arctic Silk Road is a genuine geopolitical development, but it is also frequently overhyped. The route faces real and significant challenges that limit its near-term commercial viability. First, the ice is still there. Even in summer, the Northern Sea route requires icebreaker support for most vessels. Icebreaker escort fees, combined with the costs of ice-strengthened hull construction for ships using the route regularly, add significant costs that partially offset the distance savings. Second, infrastructure is minimal. Unlike the Suez route with its developed ports, repair facilities, fuel depots, and maritime services spread across multiple continents, the Northern Sea route passes through one of the most infrastructure-sparse regions on Earth. A ship in distress in the Laptev Sea is a very long way from help. Third, the route is only seasonally viable for most ships. Even as the ice retreats, the window of ice-free or reduced ice navigation is currently limited to roughly July through November. A route that is only open 5 months per year cannot fully replace a year-round alternative. Fourth, the geopolitical environment has become more complicated, not less. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 has made Western shipping companies deeply reluctant to use Russian-controlled Arctic infrastructure. Many European companies that were exploring Northern Sea route options have shelved those plans indefinitely. The Arctic Silk Road will matter. It already does in limited ways. But the timeline to it becoming a significant alternative to existing routes is longer and more complicated than the most optimistic projections suggest. The Arctic Silk Road is a genuine geopolitical development, but it is also frequently overhyped. The route faces real and significant challenges that limit its near-term commercial viability. First, the ice is still there. Even in summer, the Northern Sea route requires icebreaker support for most vessels. Icebreaker escort fees, combined with the costs of ice-strengthened hull construction for ships using the route regularly, add significant costs that partially offset the distance savings. Second, infrastructure is minimal. Unlike the Suez route with its developed ports, repair facilities, fuel depots, and maritime services spread across multiple continents, the Northern Sea route passes through one of the most infrastructure-sparse regions on Earth. A ship in distress in the Laptev Sea is a very long way from help. Third, the route is only seasonally viable for most ships. Even as the ice retreats, the window of ice-free or reduced ice navigation is currently limited to roughly July through November. A route that is only open 5 months per year cannot fully replace a year-round alternative. Fourth, the geopolitical environment has become more complicated, not less. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 has made Western shipping companies deeply reluctant to use Russian-controlled Arctic infrastructure. Many European companies that were exploring Northern Sea route options have shelved those plans indefinitely. The Arctic Silk Road will matter. It already does in limited ways. But the timeline to it becoming a significant alternative to existing routes is longer and more complicated than the most optimistic projections suggest.